Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to, oh, this says August. Welcome. It is not August, it's October. Welcome everyone to October's community event. Thanks everyone who's bared with the change in date from last week to this week. Hopefully I didn't do too much damage to our to our signups for community events. Keep an eye out for maybe more permanent potential changes there. I think I found a more sustainable solution for when those things happen, but it might require another adding of an event, unfortunately. Okay, so for the agenda, we'll do the normal project and community stats. And then Tal's going to talk about our new Fangled data sources and some other roadmap items, product roadmap items, and we'll wrap up with questions. We are hiring. Check out jobs@superconductive.com. I just took the screenshot this morning. If there's anything in here that you're interested in, please let us know. Really be awesome to get some people from the community to join us at Great Expectations. Okay, the project and community stats. So we're at, oh, and this is actually this is on Monday, so it's probably a little bit higher than this, but since we've last met, about 655 people have joined, so we're at 8,600, which is awesome. Project keeps growing, which is great. This is what our Pi downloads have looked like at the last month. Starting to see a more steady incline after we had this little sharp drop off, but it's starting to build. We added last month 431,000 from the month previous, so it's good to see that growth starting up again. So some thanks and kudos to people in the community for their contributions to the project and some of our Slack supporters who are helping in the community, which is just really, really helpful. This is what being an open source project is about, is contributing to the project and then helping others use it. There's so many different use cases of Great Expectations, so it's awesome having so many people with different skill sets and workflows that they can share with one another, and then add in the things that will help others. A huge one came in for the AWS Glue data catalog from Lucas, which is like months and months of work. Definitely worth checking that one out. Number 5123. We'll do another share for that one in the Slack just because it was so big. Some other great ones in there by Atai for adding a failed expectation list Slack message. We have a docs fix, and then we have a SQL Alchemy selectable bug fix from Tommy Watts. Sorry, I'm not saying this name. I have no idea how to say this. We added support for Verteca dialect, some updates for ClickHouse, a lot of really good things in there. Shout out to our Slack supporters. There's a whole bunch of new ones in here as well for people that have been answering questions. So thanks a lot. Lucas in here twice, which is awesome. Same with Ty, which is great. Yeah, so thanks a lot. Everybody's contributed both in the Slack community and into the project and GitHub opening and closing PRs. All right, Tal, I'm going to pass it off to you. Let me end my screen share here.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So I'm subbing in for Don this month. And we're going to talk about new Fangled data sources. This might go without saying, but this is not a final name by any means. We will be updating the name. Do not keep referring to this. If you have questions, you can refer to this for the moment, but yeah, don't anchor too tightly to that. So, all right. So talking about this, first we're going to talk about just connecting to data, what our approach has been, what the journey has been so far, achievements, challenges, and then we'll do a bit of a demo.
Recording in progress.
Cool. So go back to this window. So some questions about connecting to data. Why is connecting to data so hard? We've heard from the community that it can be tough to configure a new data source, especially if you're using functionality which is like more buried. It can be hard to do that. And why is that difficult? Isn't it easy to connect to data? And it is, but what we would say is that data quality has like two pieces to this. So there's actually connecting to the data, like going and retrieving the table that you'd like to validate. But the important thing is not just that, but also understanding what has been validated after the fact and being able to sequence that with other batches of data that you validated as well. And so we basically rolled this into two main concepts. We've talked a little bit about this, our docs talk about this, but just to refresh, we have data assets, which I like to think of as almost like the class where batches are the instance. And so a data asset is, you have a table of taxi rides, which is a very familiar example. And maybe you want to ensure that you have the same, your number of rides within a given month or within a certain range. So you would batch that data asset, you batch that table month by month, but maybe you know that there's also a lot of seasonality. Maybe there are more taxi rides around the holidays, maybe there are fewer during the summer. And so maybe you would also want to validate that by year. And so you would have that one table of taxi rides, but you'd have one data asset, which is taxi rides by month. You'd have another data asset, which is taxi rides by year. And then when it actually comes time to validate, you would get a batch. So the batch is going to be this month or this year, and you validate that. And in doing so, you'd be able to say, well, this month passed. Last month, when I had that batch, that didn't pass. Hopefully next month it will pass. And that lets you pull out individual batches of your data and sequence them and compare them to each other. And this is like, we've seen this is something we've been thinking about for a long time, but we've seen it really come to fruition in Great Expectations recently with data assistants. So data assistants give you this really great plotting. It lets you see different metrics batch by batch. And so here we can actually see table row count for all of these batches. And you can see there's this sharp drop off over here with this batch for 16. So maybe this is like, if you imagine taxi rides, this could be coronavirus starting, it could be any number of things. So how do we configure data sources today? With a whole bunch of YAML or a pretty big Python object. You have a big bucket of config. And we do this, there are certain major benefits to this. So it gives us breadth. It lets us describe basically any data source type with the same rough shape of config. It also gives us depth, so we can vary more and more, the more arguments that we need to connect to individual data sources, we can reference those, even if it gets pretty in the weeds. It also provides an easy start. So using the CLI, we're able to pop open a notebook, pop open a YAML config. We have the test YAML config snippet, which is really great. And overall, we are able to support a whole bunch of different scenarios using a very general approach. And that lets us connect to just a whole bunch of different data sources using config, which is very similar from one to the next with not too much difference. But there are drawbacks. So we know that connecting to your data with just like one big blob of config can be difficult. If something doesn't quite work right, it can be pretty hard to get back on track. If you set things up in a specific way and you want to make minor adjustments, it can also be difficult to make incremental progress on that. We've also heard from the community that jumping back and forth between the CLI and notebooks can be kind of jarring because you're going from window to window and you set up a data source, you set up an expectation suite, you get a batch, and there's a fair amount of back and forth at play there. And maybe more importantly, if you might be working with a whole bunch of different data sources, but maybe on the whole, you're working with Snowflake. And so having a general approach isn't necessarily useful for you. You might want an experience which is just really great for Snowflake. And so it's important to have an experience which really shines with each individual use case for each specific data source. And this is especially important because we're leaning on these concepts of batches, multiple batches, more and more. And so we're starting to see this with data assistants where you can actually run a data assistant on multiple batches for better estimates, and you can get really nice visualizations of your data from all of those batches. It's going to continue with batch metric storage as well. And so in this, sorting, splitting, different ways of just dividing, partitioning your data and arranging it compared to each other is getting more and more important. One other note here, we have this notion right now of batch identifiers of how do you reference the batch after you've gotten it and validated it. But currently it's basically like a generic string, a generic dictionary that can be arbitrarily nested with generic strings, which can make that kind of hard to reference later. So we're doing more with batches. They're really important. They're not always so easy to configure. So that takes us to new fangled data sources. So there are, I think, two major tranches of goals here. There's usability improvements. And so just running through this, we want to make Great Expectations feel like it was meant to work with whatever data source is that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. If you know that you're using Snowflake and you know that these are the arguments that you want to pass in for Snowflake, it should be very clear that that's what you have available. If you're referencing data on S3, that's going to have a different set of specifications. We also want to make it possible to build out your asset and retrieve your batches in a much more incremental way. So more feedback, not configuring a big YAML doc string, but actually being able to do things in a more Pythonic way, in a more fluent way. When something doesn't work, you should know that it doesn't work as soon as you configure it. We also want to be able to add new data sources in a wide range of environments. So there are people who love notebooks, there are people who don't love notebooks, there are people who want to do everything on a REPL, there are people who don't actually have access to a file system. And so we want to make it possible to configure data sources in all of those environments and more. So that's usability, but we also are going to be increasing function as well. So we want to make it so that working with multiple batches is easy and is the default. So that means making it much easier to reference batches. That means being able to work with lists of batches and slice the way you'd slice any list in Python. And we also want to provide sensible defaults if you only have one batch. So maybe you're just doing things on a batch by batch basis, and that's fine. Then maybe you shouldn't have to worry about all the additional complexity. We also want to make it easy to build and contribute new data sources. So I think we've done a really good job with expectations, making it possible to contribute expectations. We've had some incredible expectations contributed, and so we want to make this similarly possible for data sources as well. Lastly, maybe most importantly, we want to make sure that newfangled data sources are still compatible with the current data sources. So when going from V2 to V3, we know that there were hurdles. Some users had a hard time updating, and so we're going to introduce newfangled data sources, but we're not going to force people to move over. You'll still be able to use the current form of data sources as well, and just move over basically when you're ready and when the functionality is appealing to you. So demo. So we've got this great notebook here. This is not currently in the code base, so this is basically a prototype notebook that's demonstrating functionality. Our engineering team is building these out right now, but this will give you a sense of the broader direction. And so to start, we're going to import Great Expectations, and we're going to get a data context as we always do. We're going to get a data source, a pandas data source here. This is, again, as HSVs of taxi data here, that this is what we're going to be referencing. Each one represents a specific month per year of taxi data, and we have 3 full years from 2018 to 2020. And for the sake of the demo, I have all the cells already populated, but I just want to show you there's really nice autocomplete that you get here, where you can do things like, hey, what do I have available? Well, I can add pandas, I can add SQLite. This is what we're doing to start. And so instead of having to configure things within a string, as you go all along the way, you can see what options you have to configure. So we'll add the data source first, and then we're going to add a file asset to the data source. So this, in our case, is going to be all of our taxi data files are all going to comprise one data asset, which is going to be taxi data by month. As we get individual batches, that's going to be individual months that we get. And so again, just to demonstrate the autocomplete here, we can add files asset, we can get files asset, we can get a list of assets, and also we can get the name. So if we run this, we have our file asset, we have our data source, we have our file asset. and let's see what batches we can get. And we're going to just use slicing to see what the last two batches are. And so we see here, we get two batches within this, two CSV files. Now, there's not a whole lot of helpful information here. Like we can see the file name, we can see the asset and data source name, but maybe I know that when I look at the file name, that there's a date in here, and I'd like to be able to reference that in the future. So it would be great to make it clear what information is important. And so what I'm going to do is, once I have my asset, I can add a regex parser. And that regex parser is basically going to take the file name. It's going to use a regex with two different regex groups. And the first group is going to represent the year, and the second group is going to represent the month. So now if we look here, now we have added to our metadata, we have month and year, which is great because it helps us reference things in the future. But as I look at this, I see, hey, wait a second, I'm getting the last two batches, but these are not sequential. I know that I have a full 3 years. That doesn't seem quite right. So maybe I'd like to add a sorter as well. And so here I'm going to add to my file asset, I'll add a string sorter. I'd like to first sort by the year, and then I'd like to sort by the month. So once we do this, you'll see now we have the final two batches from our file system. And that's really great, but maybe I want a quick and easy way of actually referencing each and every one of my batches by string. And so you can use something called the batch name template, which lets you pull out the metadata that you've already arranged within your data asset, and it lets you programmatically generate a name for each and every batch. And so now if I do this, you'll see each batch has a name, which is pulling from the other pieces of metadata, but this could also be specified at runtime. You can specify this in all sorts of different ways. And so just to put it all together, we have basically a few lines of code that lets us do this. The nice thing is you can also do things in a more fluent way. So you can just do dot notation to slowly build up the config. But if you just have a very simple file asset to add, you can start with a simple file asset and just slowly increase in complexity as you need it. So that's it. And this is not a fully working example, so we get a lovely, oh, well, I didn't run any of the code. Let's do this again. Here we go. So lovely little printed string, but it's all going to work together very similarly to before. So we're still going to be able to get a data asset. You're going to get some batches. You'll feed them to a validator as we do today. So moving back to the presentation. This is just, I don't know, I really like this. This is the before of configuring a data source, and this is the after. So we have this big block of config. We've got a whole bunch of stuff. We construct a batch request. Here you still can construct a batch request, but you don't need to in the same way. But in just a few lines of code, and this is a fairly complex example, but maybe you don't need the regex parser or the string sorter to start. Maybe you don't need a batch name template to start. So in essentially four or five lines of code, including the import, we're replicating what we do here, which is, yeah, I find that to be very beautiful. So next steps. So currently the engineering team is working on two initial data source types, so pandas and Postgres. So they're gonna finish those out. They'll be full end-to-end working examples. Then we'd love to gather feedback from you, from the community. If anyone wants to participate in providing user feedback and user interviews, please ping me on Slack, so Talglik. We want to make sure that as we're building this out, we're taking feedback into consideration, and we're building something that the community wants and the community can use very well. Once we go through a couple of rounds of feedback to really tighten up the design, we'll continue to build out support for other data sources. So we'll add the other things that we currently support today. That's it.
Thanks, Tal. That was awesome. Sure. Great to see all those. I like that comparison of lines of code from one to another. It's an easy way to say job well done there.
Yeah, no, that makes
Um,
me very happy.
yeah, definitely. I saw some stuff pop into the chat. If you want to check.
Yeah, let's see. So yeah, year month were the names of the groups in the regex parser. Yeah, and let me share again just to, it's hard to see the chat and share at the same time. That's the only issue. But we're seeing, here we go. Let me, in the chat, there we go. So yeah, when we initially set this up, we have this regex here. So in the parens, we have the groups, and we assign the group names with year and month over here. Is there a way to convert from JSON, from YAML and YAML to JSON? That's a great question. I mean, I think, so I believe the way this will work right now is as you add these, you'll basically save this back to your list of data sources, and then it will persist in whatever way you'd like. I think if you're using like a file-based data context, it'll persist back to file-based. Otherwise, it would probably persist to like it would remain in your data context object, like Python object. I think we're not specifically using like a JSON-based config, but I think JSON and YAML are easily convertible from one to the other. Anything else? Well, thanks everybody.
Cool. Thanks so much, Tal. Tal, do you have any other insights on like what are the immediate other things that we're working on, or is this sort of taking over our product roadmap line of sight right now?
Yeah, I think this is the main next thing. I think this in conjunction with maybe some other usability improvements around data contexts and around validators, I think that's going to be the bulk of our focus for the near future.
Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask? You could feel free to pop on the mic. Otherwise, we can keep moving along. So thanks so much, Tal. That was awesome. One more thing to add in is we've been sending along a survey for people who are interested in Great Expectations Cloud. So there's now like super early access to Great Expectations Cloud with it has parity with the open source platform. If you're interested in potentially being an early adopter, I'm going to put a survey into the chat. Please grab that and fill it out. And if you're just also fill it out if you're just interested in following along. So if you want to just learn more and see how it's progressing, like maybe it's not ready for you now, but if you just put in there what it is that you're interested, like if cloud can do X or Y that you would adopt, then we can make sure we keep you informed when it does that. And then of course also there sign up for cloud workshops as well, which I will add to here. But definitely do the form piece if you want to stay more intimately involved and maybe become an early user of cloud. Alina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks, Kyle. And if you just want to chat with anybody about it, feel free to reach out to me, Alina, or Matthew Lundgren on Slack.
Yes, perfect. All right, well, thanks everyone for making it to the replacement event, and hopefully I didn't bother you too much by email and Slack and all that stuff. Cool. All right, I'll see you all next month.